All right, welcome back, everybody. Coach Camp with us today as our guest, but Coach Roye, let me introduce you first. Our co-host once again. Thanks for coming back, Coach Roye.
Always a good time, Joe. I appreciate it. It's a great opportunity to catch up with some old friends for me, and I always love to talk hoops. So I'm really glad to be here. I'm really excited about our guest today. I think over the last few years, and going back even farther than that, I've had the chance to I was unable to be the camp otters over the years, but the last few years we've started to swing the rivalry in the other direction. But Coach, thanks for taking the time to meet with us today. We really appreciate it. How you doing these days?
Happy to be here, guys. I really appreciate the invite, and anytime you get a chance to talk, hoop with people like yourself, it's always special. New Hampshire's got a lot to offer, and I appreciate you guys, helping spread the word about all of our student athletes.
Let me get us rolling, Drew. One thing people may or may not know about Coach is he had a career up at Colby Sawyer here in New Hampshire, and Coach Camp actually played on some of the best teams that Colby Sawyer's ever had. And the nice thing about those teams, Coach, and I remember seeing you guys play several times, is you were loaded with New Hampshire kids. It wasn't a case of somebody going out of state and loading up. They were all local kids. And I'm curious how that experience has helped you with your own players when they're looking for schools and chances to play and things like that.
Yeah, great question. I was fortunate, Colby Sawyer, once it had went, co-ed, they had built the athletic center, the Hogan Center there, that ironically, a lot of our student athletes here at Kearsarge, they go to and use. And again, like Coach Fody was one of the best coaches around. He did a phenomenal job of recruiting, like you said. And he had a hotbed of like New Hampshire kids. So he was connected with all the coaches across the state of New Hampshire, but also Maine, Massachusetts, Vermont. I mean, we had a plethora of kids that were local, and then our schedule was somewhat in all those states I just mentioned. So there was always like away games that was near where a kid grew up, so there was always a following, always, Colby Sawyer people in the crowd, and families that wouldn't miss games, we always had a following and a cheering section. And I think that's pretty special. And some of those guys are to this day, like my best friends, and we still get together. And it's a situation where, we all care about each other. We have a brotherhood, and now I'm kind of teaching that level of brotherhood with my high school program, where you got to have each other's backs. You got to be there for each other on and off the court, and it's a lot of those similar characteristics, and kind of like the backbone to anyone's program. And I'm certainly getting back to your last part of your question with regards to student athletes that want to play at the next level. It is so hard, and kids these days really don't know. It's really hard to play a Division III anything. You know what I mean? Let alone D2 or D1. D3 sports in general. I'm fortunate. I've got two daughters, as you mentioned, and Ellie's playing lacrosse at St. Lawrence, and Caroline's playing soccer down at Connecticut College, and those are great schools. And but they've had to really work at it, and they still like put a ton of time in. And that's just to be on the team. You know what I mean? Like they both are fortunate to play, like, and be like in the rotations. But I mean, there's kids that they're friends with that they're on the team, but they just don't play, And so it's really, really, it's just a lot of things that go into it. A lot of the mental aspects of the game, and being a student, like a student of the game, and having a high IQ in any sport to be able to play at that level.
Yeah. And, having spent some time over at Riviera, I don't think people also get the academic piece of it. They have to be able to manage their time. And you'd see kids, I'm sure your daughter's the same way, doing homework on the bus on the way to a game. And time management becomes so important to play at that level. you can let your grades slip in a hurry, and then there's no more soccer, if you're not careful. So that's really good stuff. I just got one more, Drew, then I'll throw it to you. Coach, you mentioned the brotherhood of the players that you played with. Watching your teams over the years, I think, whether they were a favorite in the division or you were in a rebuild mode or whatever, your teams always seem to have great chemistry as far as, kids come off the floor, they're being high-fived by the whole staff and the other kids. They're into the game. They have each other's backs, as you mentioned, all the time. Talk about how you build that with your teams, because it's noticeable with the Kearsarge teams. The kids are all into the game. They're enthusiastic. They cheer for each other, whether they're playing or not. That can be missing in today's high school sports,
Yeah, no, I appreciate you noticing that. It's a cornerstone of what we try to preach, and teach at Kearsarge, kind of in all sports, but definitely like with our program, what we're trying to do is, like, I want every kid to understand, like, they're part of something bigger than themselves. You know what I mean? Like, so basketball is the piece of it, but you got to bring more to the table than just that. You got to bring your energy, you got to bring your attitude. We talk a lot about body language. We talk a lot about, like, all right, well, if you're hitting your shots, great, you're helping the team. But when you're not hitting your shots, how are you helping the team? Right. And that's a missing component these days because everybody's so egocentric, right? Like, everyone's like, all right, it's about me, it's about me, it's about me. I put all this time in, and now it's not about me because coach isn't running a play for me, or I'm not hitting my shots, right? Like, no, like, I'll run plays, but like, you might have to set a screen for somebody else. And then maybe the ball is going to get rotated back for you and you're going to be open for a shot. But if you set a lousy screen, I'm going to see it. And then I'm going to call you out during film session about in front of the whole team. And that's kind of how that whole process works. Like, you got to hold them kind of accountable, like almost like whether it's the best player. I mean, I can remember when we were, winning our state championship back in 2017, we had come back with a lot of those similar guys the next year. And I went up to them during right before film session. We don't have film session every day, but we have built-in times where we try to watch it each week. And I went to my best player, or one of my best players at the time was Taylor Matos, who went on to play Division I. And I said, hey, listen, I just want to let you know, I'm coming at you at film session today. Like, I'm going to call you out in front of the team. He's like, okay. And like, he knew, like, all right, like, he can't escape, and if that's the mentality, then they all know that, like, nobody's safe. And that helps breed that trust, and knowing, like, all right, I'm accountable to coach, but I'm also accountable to all my teammates. And then they get it, and it doesn't happen right away. But I think once coaches forget about being like friends with them and don't worry about that, you can just kind of be honest with them, and they want that feedback, and they want to toe the line. They want to be held accountable.
Definitely. Drew, you had a chance to watch Coach work the other night, so I'm going to toss it over to you. I'm sure you have questions for him.
Yeah, of course. So just to your last point, Coach, I think it's really important as a coach to be able to manage in between doing two different things, which is you want to be positive, you want to be encouraging. You don't want your players to think of you as an absolute jerk and want nothing to do with you and ruin the sport for them or whatever. But you also, like you said, you want to be hard on them and you want to push them to be the best versions of themselves. As a coach, how do you manage that? Because that's a really tough line to walk.
Great question, Drew. I think part of it, like obviously, like my first few years, that was tough. Like, I might have been, I was in my younger 30s or whatever, and that's always tough because you want to build relationships with the kids, right? You want to know that you're bought into them. They want to know that you're bought into them. And then eventually, I just got comfortable with, like, my style, and it's just, guys, we're here to get better, like, every day, right? And if you're going to loaf, or if you're going to do something that's not going to help us get better today, then, like, I got to call you on it. And if they see that I'm calling people out, whether it's the kid that's like 14th or 15th off the bench, or whether it's the best player in the gym, then they kind of governs itself. You know what I mean? But just being true to yourself and really like your values. Like if you want to value that brotherhood, then like you can't all of a sudden have favorites. You know what I mean? Like you just can't like pick and choose like who you want to be hard on and who you don't. So that brotherhood comes from like talking, teaching what you preach, if you will, and believing in it and sticking to it. Because kids are smart, man. Like they see right through that stuff. They see if it's fake or not. So you just got to be real with them. And then what I try to do is I try to give them feedback, and I'll say like, all right, I give them like a note card at the beginning of the season, and I ask them questions like, hey, what are your goals? What are the team goals that you want to have for the team? Who do you want to dedicate the season to? And then I ask them flat out, like, how many minutes do you think you're going to play? And then I have that sheet of paper, like I've got it right over there in my folder, and we're almost halfway through the season. So I'm going to talk to these kids and just say, hey, you might not be getting those minutes that you would hope, but you can still help us. Like you can still find ways. So it's that constant feedback, just checking in with kids too, to making sure that let them know that, because I always tell kids, if I'm not talking to you, then that's not a good thing. You know what I mean? Like you want to be in the conversations with me about stuff,
Yeah. When you're in a situation where, like, obviously when you're winning and things are going well, and you're one of the top teams in the division or what have you, there's going to be a lot of faith and there's going to be a lot of collective confidence in yourself as well as the team. But when things are going tough as a coach, and I think every coach who's coached long enough has experienced this, where you have tough, you have your ups and downs, but when you have like those downs and you have really challenging times where you're under 500 or whatever, and you got a tough schedule and there's injuries and things aren't going well, and you're still preaching the right stuff, but how do you get them to buy into that when the results aren't going the way you want?
Again, great question. That's a challenge, like we had a nice run where I think it was, I don't know, 4 out of the previous like 7 years, we had been either in the semifinals or in the finals. And so that was a stretch and then we had last year, which we really struggled. And so getting the kids, we played a lot of younger kids. They all got better. We're making improvements even this year, and we got some guys back that were injured. So I think just, again, being true to ourselves, sticking to what we believe in as like teaching the right things, like there's going to be times where we're not going to win on the scoreboard, but we're doing good things. We're playing great defense. We're rebounding. We're doing a lot of things that we constantly preach. And we just got to stick with it. It takes a tremendous amount of patience, because obviously winning is, it cures, even whether you shoot well or whatever, like shooting well and getting wins, and you feel good about that, right? But when you lose, like it takes a tremendous amount of patience, because, and I tell this to my captains, I'll say this to everybody, guys, everybody wants to lead when we're up 20 or when we're like 5-1 or whatever the record might be, right? But when you're 1-5 and you're struggling to just score, like who's leading then? Like that's the real character piece, and really, because that can be for just beyond our basketball season. Like I need you to lead when things aren't going well in the classroom, or things aren't going well with your work or whatever down the road when you get older.
What do you think some of the unique challenges are with coaching high schoolers that is different from any other age group that a lot of people, parents, whoever it might be, don't think of? Because there's typical things I think we all think of when we think of stereotypical high school players, but it can be different in reality, and you've seen that a lot more in depth over your years of coaching.
Yeah, I think one of my strengths is that, like, I can read people, and I can get into their head a little bit and try to motivate them. And so this age group, I think, is where I've been able to, use some of that to my strength. It's hard. Like, it takes a tremendous amount of patience. There's going to be times where a kid, like, I don't know, a kid's sick, or the kid can't be at practice, or there's just a lot of things that come up, like tonight, like with the weather is coming in, right? Like, you just don't know what's happening for tomorrow. There's just a lot of variables. And so there's all things that you're juggling. I mean, a kid could have driver's ed, a kid could have So there's all these other extenuating circumstances that like maybe, elementary or middle school kids don't have, but what we do have is that we've got kids that want to buy in and we've got kids that want to be there. And I think that that's a positive. Like, for example, I teach middle school science, right? So I've got kids that really like science and I've got kids that can't stand it, right? I try to make it fun for them. But the good thing about varsity basketball is that by the time they get to me, like they want to be there. Like they've looked for wanting to wear like the blue and gold for years. So now they're finally there. They've arrived. You know what I mean? So I think tapping into that, and I was fortunate. I played for Coach Metcalf up in Lebanon, and he was like a legend, like a god up there. So if you ever got to that point, and you could play for him, then you've arrived. And then you're like your best part of your day is 2:45 when you're in the gym with him, and that's. I mean, I can't even compare to Metcalf, but like if a kid that plays for us feels that way, then that, that their best part of their day is with us. And that's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to talk a little bit more specifically about your team now. Like you had like that whole run, like you mentioned before, where you guys were very successful, were consistently going to the Final Four and everything. What were some of the challenges of last season and how that caused you to develop more as a coach?
I think we spent a lot of time with, again, drilling the fundamentals, working on a lot of like skill work in the off season, and just trying to gain confidence with kids that were coming back. A lot of kids have, put time in to get better, which is fantastic. I mean, obviously, when you get your best player back from an injury, that makes a difference. I mean, Noah Whipple, who had a knee injury for last year and missed all last season. He just, like I was watching film the other day, like of him playing with us currently, like this year. And if a play breaks down, like he's just good enough where he can go take the ball himself. And he might not even have to score. I mean, he can, but he could just drive and draw two people and then he finds somebody that's open. And that's not anything that I did from the sideline. He's just got the confidence and the ability to do that. And I give him the freedom to do that as a coach, but like, he's making everybody around him better, and that's certainly a testament to him. I think also we've gotten better defensively, whereas I think last year, we struggled to score and we weren't great on defense, and that's not a good recipe. Like that's you're not going to win many games that way. So I think our defense is, our numbers and our percentages are better in that respect too. So and I think we have a little bit more like chemistry. I mean, I liked our group last year, but I think this year we've got more togetherness and that they're more connected on and off the court. Perfect example is like this weekend coming up on Saturday, we're going to go down and watch the Hall of Fame class, like the Hoop Classic, which will be Cooper Flagg is playing for Mount Bird against Brewster Academy. And so, but my captains showed me the link. They're like, Coach, we can go watch this game. Like they're selling tickets. So we scoffed up a bunch of tickets and we're going to that as a team. And like, that's something that like, I love doing that with the kids. Like they're going to remember that more so than maybe like the final score of a game. So.
Yeah, for sure. I got to watch your team a little bit last week when you guys were up here at Hopkinton playing Hopkinton. And I mean, like you said, Noah was a focal point of your offense. He scored 20 or 21 points. I think he had a pretty good game and he really opened up opportunities for everybody else. What other players are there out there on your team right now that you want to highlight the little things that they do well that might not always be noticed? Sure.
Yeah. I think, we've got a good mix of kids. The good thing is like, we're pretty like versatile. Like there's a lot of kids that are like 6 foot, 6'1", 6'2". So, we don't have like that 6'6" or 6'7" kid, but we can scrap with most teams. And I think Parker Goen, he certainly does a great job inside. He didn't play that night. He was hurt, but like the ability for him inside, he's done a really good job this year as a senior for us. Eddie Kinzer is another senior that's similar. Like he's about 6 foot, does all the dirty work, sets screens, rebounds. So those two guys as seniors really help set the tone. Noah, who you mentioned as a junior, he's a captain and just kind of does it all for us. Also in the junior mix is Austin Needham, who's like one of our shooters and just really steps up. He's the boy that missed the buzzer shot, basically, that was to try to win that game against Hopkinton. And then all he does is he came out last night against Fall Mountain and he hit 4 threes in like the first half. Like he's that type of a kid where he's very, very, very streaky in a good way. So he gets us going from the perimeter. And then there's AJ Tremblay, who's been really solid for us. He's another like 6-foot guard wing. And then we've got some good youth too. Like we've got so as a sophomore, we've got Drew Huff, who's the lanky 6'1", 6'2" kid that he plays. He can pretty much play 1 through 5 if we have to. He can shoot it, he can dribble it, but he defends. And then the freshman I really like is Noah's brother Eli Whipple, who he's going to be really good for us. He's a guard that can really shoot it. He's still a little young, but he's getting more and more minutes for us. So there's just a whole group of kids that they love it. There's more kids too that I haven't mentioned, but that's really the core that's really been stepping up.
I feel like with basketball in New Hampshire, you can go to a bunch of different schools and you can coach, you can coach at Kearsarge and you can coach across the state and wherever else and have different experiences. I think there's a lot of overlap in terms of the way things are run, in terms of just like the size of a lot of the schools, the playing style and stuff. But what is it that sets Kearsarge apart to you that's really unique about that school and about just the way that those teams work?
So when I graduated Colby Sawyer, I spent some time. I was working in admissions at Colby Sawyer, and I was like an assistant coach with the women's basketball team at Colby Sawyer. And I saw all the kids. Like I would see all the Kearsarge, players coming into the gym at the Hogan Center, and I always thought that they were like, gamers. Like they put time in to want to get better. And gym rats, you know what I mean? And then Marty Brown got me on staff, and I'm forever grateful for that, because Marty, I've got great connections with him from years ago. I mean, he's originally a Lebanon guy, played for Coach Metcalf. He like grew up with my uncle, my parents, played sports with them. And so when I was settling here with my wife and my kids, like he was constantly a mentor to me. And what he always preached was that, like there's always kids that, whether it's like Lebanon or whether it be Kearsarge or Hopkinton, like there's always kids that want to like work hard and like go through a brick wall for you. You just have to find them and then believe in them. And he always got the best out of his players. I mean, there were years where he probably had no business winning 9 games, and he just constantly did. He was blessed with some phenomenal players that came through here as well. But there were some lean years too, and he found ways, and he upset people that he probably shouldn't have. So I always try to take that mentality and try to help that live on with the program, because we might not always have the best players. Like if the best players on the opponent's side, that's fine. We just have to out coach and out scrap and outwork and do all of that to kind of compensate for it. And then if we do have the best player on the floor wearing blue and gold, then obviously that's an advantage, and we have to capitalize on that too.
Nate, I had some great experiences with Marty when I was coaching at Campbell. We would go down to the Cape Cod every year for a preseason jamboree, and at night, Dan Kesslinger and I would run into Marty at the mall or something, and just sitting there listening to him talk hoops and talk about kids. And his understanding of kids was like a PhD in coaching philosophy for me, talking to him. And it's true, we would sit there and ask him, what kind of year are you going to have? He goes, he would say, we're going to go 2-6, 2-7, because the kids won't be listening to me yet. Then I'll sit them down, explain it, how it has to be. We'll win our last 5 or 6, and then nobody will want to play us in the tournament. And it pretty much worked out that way a lot of years for him. But I always enjoyed spending time with Marty. He was a great guy.
Yeah, phenomenal guy, and you're right. He did have a PhD in people, and I think that's one of the skills that I got from him, or just from being around him so much. Is it's just, hey, you got to believe in those kids and get them to, if they're here, you got to get them to play here. And when you do that, that's really special. Like that's coaching, right? So, and I think again, I've been around it enough now to kind of say this, but there are some of like maybe the younger coaches that just think, oh, we're just going to be good.
Right.
Well, yeah, you're good. You got some talent maybe, right? But you got to get them to go from here to there. That's growth, you know?
Yeah, I found that my last few years as well. A lot of them come in from an AAU background or just right out of college, and they don't have the sense of what they have for a team. Right. They try to play a certain way without the right kids, and it becomes a real headache for them. That's tough for a young coach. I did want to touch on one thing. I think one of the things I've really loved my last few years at Hopkinton has been, there's not a real sense of rivalry like there was 15 years ago. When I was coaching in Nashua, if we played Bishop Girton, if you weren't there by the start of the JV game, you didn't get in, and it was just a big deal. But over the last few years, there's been a really healthy, I think, and respectful rivalry with Hopkinton and Kearsarge. And, I know coaching against Keith and now Ed Tenney's there, I always respected the way their kids handled themselves. We always had good games, and at the end, there were handshakes and great job and good luck. And there wasn't any of the negative sides of a good rivalry. And I thought the other night, sitting in the crowd, watching that crowd size, those double headers are such a great thing for the kids. You talked about memories, plus it's a tournament warm up. I mean, it sounded like a tournament game in there. And how much better can you do than that in December, or early January? That's really a neat thing. So maybe talk a little bit about how this is developing Hopkinton and Kearsarge. I know the kids play all the way back down to youth sports. They play against each other. But I'm just curious on your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, it's been great. I couldn't agree more. It's healthy. It's to push each other to be the best, or it's been a really, what I like about it is that some of those kids have either played with each other, maybe like in an AAU event, or maybe they've been like in a lacrosse youth program together, for example, right? But they know each other, and then they take it to the court, and they're like, all right, we don't like, they can talk to each other, but it's not like the dirty trash talk stuff. You know what I mean? Right. Like it's fun. It's fun banter. And then afterwards, like, I think Noah A-Frame and the Whipples, like a bunch of them from Hopkinton and the Kearsarge kids, they all got their picture taken together, like after the game, like it was pretty cool. Like that's what it's about, like they can compete, but they're going to have the good memories, and that's pretty special because, it's bigger than Coach Camp. It's bigger than Coach Brown. It's bigger than any of the coaches at Hopkinton. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, it's for the kids and for the families that this is what it's really about. And I hope we can continue. I hope it continues. Like the varsity double headers are great for that. The crowd was fantastic at our place, also at Hopkinton. And it's really hard to replicate that and get ready for the playoffs, like you said. And that was 100% a playoff type atmosphere because both teams had to make plays down the stretch, and you can't replicate that in practice. Like you just can't. Right. So it's really the win for everybody. And I appreciate the ADs and the coaches for doing it.
Did we freeze on you, buddy? You there, Drew?
Yeah, sorry. You froze for a second.
I apologize. Yes. Could you get a sense of that while you were announcing? Could you see the competitiveness, but the respect issue in those games?
Oh, yeah, certainly. I mean, that's one of the reasons I was very excited to do the game last week, because I saw the same thing last year as well when we had both those games, both at Kearsarge and up, and so I thought it was a really good thing. So I enjoyed it a lot. I think that's a good thing. Coach, I had another question for you that I think sort of ties in, which is that you have the evolution of the game over time, and you also have the evolution of people. And when those two things change, the fundamentals of what makes a good coach might still be the same. But how has coaching and the idea of what makes a good coach changed as the game's evolved and how people have evolved over the last couple of decades?
Great question. I think it's just patience, really. Like you really have to. and really know, like, get to know the kids so you can really know what buttons to push with certain kids. I mean, that's the other thing about knowing and being a part of Kearsarge for me is I get to know them. Like, they come to my camp when they're little, like when they're like third, fourth, fifth grade. So I get to know them a little bit. And then I can maybe teach them at the middle school level, and then I coach them at the high school. Right. So I can kind of see how that's going to work, because there's some kids that you can ride and you can push and really motivate. And then there's others that are just going to, like, fold up. So you got to pick and choose that. And it's not showing favoritism. It's just knowing your kids, and so that part's really important. I already talked about, holding kids accountable. I would say, like, the evolution of, like, the basketball thing right now is that, like, a lot of people want to shoot the 3-pointer, and that's been a big part of the game. And I think the piece that we do with our staff is that you've got to prove to our staff through, like, statistics and, like, time at practice. Like, we have a system where it's like, are you red, are you yellow, or are you green? And green is where everybody wants to work towards. They're the ones that, will get most of the shots. And rightly so, right? Like, you're not going to magically everybody's green, because you're going to have kids taking shots they shouldn't be taking. And that still happens, but that's when you got to address it. And that's when you got to say, all right, well, listen, you got to put some time into the gym, because if you want to be taking those shots, there's a reason why, Whipple or whoever else on our team is green, and they put the time in and they've got confidence to make those shots. So I think that's a big piece, because everybody wants to be Steph Curry, and I get that. But show me that you can make those consistently, and then we can chat. And that's kind of a big piece is in our offense, there's some freedom to take those shots, while at the same time, like, how else can you help us? Because you might not have put the time in, and that's where you've got to be real with the kids. And you've got to say, like, hey, I know you want to take those shots, but you haven't put the time in. And that's just me being me. Like, that's just me being fair right now.
Yeah. Final question I have for you is, in 2024, with the current way that Division III shakes out, when you look at some of the other teams, the other coaches, and who you have to compete against to ultimately get to that ultimate goal at the end of the season, how do you have to adapt your team based on the different styles of play that these different teams at the top have?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a lot about defense and rebounding. That's kind of been our thing that we talk a lot about with the kids. If you look historically, the teams at the top of the division, they're night in, night out. They're scoring, but most importantly, they're holding their teams low with points. And so you're going to have to be clean on offense. Like, when we're on offense, you're going to have to run through our sets and really get a good look. Can't take the first shot that presents itself. But be confident with what we're doing, right? Because, it could be where you got to win a game 38-36 or whatever, There's going to be a lot of that. I mean, I look at someone like Conant. They're able to grind games out in the 20s and 30s, and they're fine with doing so. I think that I'm looking at St. Thomas and Mascoma and Guilford, those guys that are all right up there. Like, they're all really solid defensive teams. Yes, they can score. So it's going to be hard if those teams get in like the 50s, you're not going to beat them. Like, because they're just gonna, like, it's gonna be hard. And if they get to 60, forget it. Like, there's no chance. So you've got to, you like my team and everybody else's team, like, you've got to do a good job of keeping them in the 30s or 40s to try to be successful. And that's hard to do, but that's kind of the mindset.
Yeah. That's all from me. But if you want to add anything, you're certainly welcome to. I appreciate you joining us today, Coach.
Well, I would like to shout, first off, great job, Drew. Awesome questions. And I hope you have a long career in like the sports industry, and hope to see you on Sports Center someday. But and then Coach Roye, I just have a lot of respect for you from over the years. You've been a mentor to a lot of people, and I know my daughters really looked up to you And although that was, playing against you, they always respected you, and you always had your teams well coached, and you always made a difference with your team. So please know that you're well respected across the state.
I would have traded just a little bit of that respect from your daughters for a W a couple times. That would. I'm only kidding. No, that I can throw it right back at you, Nate. Your teams, they always handle themselves with class. They play really hard. Your daughters were class all the way. They played the game right. They played hard. They competed. You never saw them barking at an official or making a face at the crowd or any of that stuff that drives us coaches nuts. So it's been a great thing. And I think a big part of that is the Hawken and Kearsarge rivalry that goes on. I think the kids really respect each other, and that really shows. Makes it a fun game to watch, regardless of the outcome. I'm sure it would have been more fun for you guys if you got one more bucket the other night, but
that's part of it, right? Like that's the highs and the lows.
Yeah. But thank you so much for your time. I know you have, I think, Stevens tonight.
I'm heading to practice like right now, and we've got Stevens. So we played Fall Mountain last night. We won. We've got Stevens tomorrow night. It's a doubleheader so we're at 5, girls are at 6:30.
Oh, good.
And then we've got Newfound on Thursday. So hopefully we can.
You guys go on a nice run and get things rolling. We all know it's how you're playing in February that matters, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
Thanks a million, Nate. I really appreciate you coming on. Drew, great job, buddy.